The morning sun poured through the massive glass windows of the Wellington mansion, painting the marble floors with golden streaks. Ava moved quietly, balancing a silver tray of breakfast dishes as the house buzzed with soft music and expensive perfume. To everyone here, she was just the maid, polite, quiet, invisible. But Ava carried herself with a grace that didn't fit her uniform. The other maids whispered about her, how she always spoke with confidence, how her posture screamed elegance. They couldn't understand why someone who looked like she belonged in the owner's chair was scrubbing counters for a living. Mrs. Wellington, the lady of the house, noticed it too, and she didn't like it. That morning, Ava arrived wearing a simple black uniform and a pair of sleek designer heels. Not flashy, but expensive. The brand discreetly glimmered at the edge of her ankle strap. Mrs. Wellington's eyes locked on them instantly. "Where did you get those?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Ava blinked. "Oh, these? They were a gift." "A gift?" Mrs. Wellington repeated, letting out a mocking laugh. "From who? Your boyfriend?" The other staff froze. The air turned heavy. Ava forced a polite smile. "From someone who appreciates good work," she said quietly. Mrs. Wellington's lips curled. "You're a maid, Ava. Maids don't wear $100-$200 shoes. They clean them." Ava wanted to respond, to say something, anything. But years of keeping her head down taught her to stay silent. She lowered her gaze. "You're fired," Mrs. Wellington snapped. The entire room gasped. "For what, ma'am?" Ava whispered. "For pretending to be someone you're not," Mrs. Wellington said coldly. "Take your little luxury dreams out of my house." Ava's heart pounded, but she didn't beg. She quietly set down the tray, unpinned her name tag, and walked out through the grand hallway. Her footsteps echoed, each one steadier than the last. As she reached the gate, the security guard, a kind old man named Louis, jogged up to her. "Miss Ava, I'm sorry." She had no right, Ava smiled softly. "It's all right, Louis. Sometimes people don't know who they're talking to." He frowned. You sound like you got a plan." Ava gave him a knowing look. "Maybe I do." She opened her phone and scrolled through her notifications. Dozens of unread emails. One labeled, "Confidential Board Meeting Confirmation, Ava Sinclair Holdings." Her reflection in the screen didn't look like a maid anymore. The grand living room of the Wellington mansion had never been this quiet. The laughter, the gossip, even the faint jazz music from the speakers. Everything had died the moment Ava Sinclair stepped through those doors. She stood poised, elegant, and impossibly composed, the same woman they had dismissed as a maid just hours ago. Mrs. Wellington's lips trembled as she tried to regain her composure. "There must be some mistake. You can't be that Ava Sinclair." Ava tilted her head, smiling faintly. "And which Ava Sinclair would that be, ma'am?" The billionaire one," Mrs. Wellington stuttered. "The one who owns half the real estate in this city." Ava chuckled softly. "Yes, that one." A ripple of gasps filled the room. The socialites exchanged nervous glances, suddenly remembering every snide remark they had made earlier that morning. Mrs. Wellington's husband, Mr. Wellington, a tall, serious-looking man in a designer suit, stepped forward. "Mrs. Sinclair, I don't understand. Why were you working here as a maid?" Ava's expression remained calm, but her eyes hardened. "Let's just say I wanted to see how people treat those they think are beneath them." She turned slightly, looking at the ornate chandeliers, the golden picture frames, the delicate roses arranged in crystal vases. "It's funny, Mr. Wellington. I bought this house 3 weeks ago, anonymously through my holding company. I wanted to renovate it. When I found out your wife had hired a new maid, I thought, why not see things for myself?" Mrs. Wellington's face went pale. You own this house?" Ava nodded slowly. "Every inch of it." The silence that followed was almost suffocating. The only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Ava walked to the window, her heels clicking against the marble floor, the same sound that had once offended Mrs. Wellington. "When you fired me for wearing designer shoes, I almost laughed," she said, her voice calm but cold. "Those weren't a gift, Mrs. Wellington. They were part of a collection I designed." Someone gasped from the corner. You design too? Ava smiled gently. Sinclair Couture. Maybe you've heard of it? One of the guests, a woman wearing pearls, whispered. Oh my God, she's that Ava Sinclair, the woman who was featured in Forbes. Ava turned to Mrs. Wellington, her gaze unwavering. Do you remember what you said this morning? That maids shouldn't wear expensive shoes, that they should know their place? Mrs. Wellington opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ava continued, her tone sharp but graceful. I do know my place, Mrs. Wellington. It's right here, at the top. I worked for everything I have. I started with nothing, cleaning offices after college classes, saving every dollar. I built a company from the ground up, and you dismissed me because you couldn't see past my skin color and a uniform. The entire room felt her words like a blade, cutting but true. Mr. Wellington cleared his throat awkwardly. Ms. Sinclair, please understand, this is not about you, Ava interrupted firmly. It's about the kind of arrogance that people like your wife have. She thought wealth gave her the right to humiliate others. But money doesn't buy class, Mr. Wellington. Integrity does. Mrs. Wellington looked down, tears of embarrassment pooling in her eyes. Ava softened slightly. I don't need an apology. I just hope, the next time you see someone working for you, you'll remember that everyone has a story you know nothing about. She turned toward the door, preparing to leave. But before she did, she paused and glanced over her shoulder. Oh, and one more thing. I'll be sending new ownership papers tomorrow. The staff will stay. You, however, she let the sentence hang in the air, a faint smile on her lips, might want to start looking for a new place to live. The guests stared in disbelief as Ava walked out, shoulders straight, chin high, her every step radiating strength. The same heels Mrs. Wellington had mocked now echoed through the hall like victory drums. When the limousine doors closed behind her, Ava finally exhaled. She glanced out the window at the mansion disappearing behind her. For a long moment, her reflection looked back, not the maid they had seen, not the billionaire she had become, but the girl who had once scrubbed floors dreaming of this day. Louis, the old gate guard, stood near the driveway, smiling proudly as she passed. Ava lowered the window and waved. Told you I had a plan, she said with a wink. The sun had barely risen over the city when Ava's phone began to buzz nonstop. Every headline carried her name. Maid turned billionaire CEO stuns the elite. Ava Carter's speech changes everything. But Ava didn't care about the spotlight. She sat in her quiet penthouse office, sipping coffee, her red heels resting neatly beside her chair. Those same heels, once the reason she lost her job, now stood as a symbol of everything she'd fought for. Maya, her loyal assistant, entered with a tablet in hand. Ms. Carter, requests are flooding in, interviews, brand deals, even a documentary offer. Ava gave a soft laugh. People love a good twist. But Maya, I don't want to just be a story. I want to start something. Maya tilted her head. Start what? A movement, Ava replied, her eyes firm. A place for every woman who's been told she's too small, too ordinary. I want to create chances for them, the kind I never had. 2 days later, Ava arrived at the Wilson estate again, not as their maid, but as their guest. When the butler opened the door, he froze for a moment, unsure how to address her. Good morning, Ms. Carter, he finally said, voice trembling with respect. Ava smiled kindly. It's just Ava. I'm here to see Mrs. Wilson. Inside, Mrs. Wilson waited, her face pale, hands clasped nervously. The arrogance that once filled her eyes was gone, replaced by guilt. Ms. Carter. I mean, Ava, she began, voice shaking. I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I was wrong, cruel even. I let my pride blind me. You didn't deserve that. Ava nodded slowly. You're right. I didn't. But I've also learned that people don't change when you humiliate them. They change when you teach them. Mrs. Wilson looked down. If there's any way I can make this right. There is, Ava interrupted softly. I'm launching a new foundation, the second step. It'll support women working in domestic service, maids, cooks, nannies, who want to build something more for themselves. Mrs. Wilson looked up, surprised. That's incredible. I'd like you to help me run it, Ava said simply. Mrs. Wilson froze. Me? Yes, Ava replied. You have influence, resources, and a story that could change people's minds. I'm offering you a second step, too. A chance to turn your mistake into something meaningful. Tears welled in Mrs. Wilson's eyes. Ava, I don't deserve this kindness. Maybe not, Ava said with a faint smile. But sometimes grace isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it. Mrs. Wilson nodded, wiping her eyes. Then I'll do it. I'll help. Ava extended her hand. Mrs. Wilson hesitated, then shook it. The same hand that had once dismissed Ava now held onto hers, trembling, grateful. When months passed. The Second Step initiative became a national headline, training hundreds of women in business, finance, and self-development. On the day of its first graduation ceremony, Ava stood on a stage surrounded by women of every color, age, and background. She looked over the crowd and saw Mrs. Wilson among them, clapping proudly. Years ago, Ava began, her voice steady. I was told I didn't belong in certain rooms. I was told I wasn't enough. But what people forget is, diamonds shine brightest when they're pressured. The audience cheered. I don't stand here today for revenge, Ava continued, smiling softly. I stand here for every woman who cleaned rooms, washed dishes, or carried other people's dreams while hiding her own. You belong here. You always did. Tears streamed down the faces of many in the audience. As the applause roared, Ava's eyes glistened. She glanced down at her red heels, polished, shining, and whispered under her breath, "These shoes didn't make me powerful. Walking through fire did." That night, Ava drove home quietly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mrs. Wilson. "Thank you for teaching me what real class looks like." Ava smiled, typing back. It was never about class, Mrs. Wilson. It was about character. As she looked out at the glittering city skyline, she felt at peace. The girl who once scrubbed floors was now building futures. And in that moment, Ava Carter realized her greatest victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving that kindness, too, could be a form of power.